everybody, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Oh,
All right.
and I just started the live stream.
Great.
Okay, wonderful.
And Madam Chair, we do have a quorum, so when you're ready.
Excellent. Welcome, Representative Freiberg. We're happy to have you. Do the formal introduction here in a moment.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us virtually for this meeting of the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board. I now call this meeting of the CAP Board to order. As chair of the CAP Board, I determined that an in-person meeting was not practical because of the current health pandemic and ongoing peacetime emergency declared under Chapter 12 of Minnesota statutes. As is permitted under open meeting law in these conditions, this meeting of the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board is being conducted over a virtual video call, and all votes will be counted by roll call. Members of the public can view this meeting via live stream on the CAP Board's YouTube channel, and a recording of this meeting will be posted on the site following today's meeting. Like all of our meetings since the pandemic started, we'll begin by determining if a quorum is present by conducting a roll call. But before I conduct the roll call, I want to quickly note two updates from CAP membership and explain how that will impact today's meeting. First, as you recall, Representative Dean participated in his last official meeting as CAP board member last December. Representative Freiberg was appointed to replace Representative Dean and is with us today. Representative Freiberg, after we conduct the roll call for attendance, we will administer the official CAP board oath of office. And the second update is that Mayor Carter's office has made an appointment for the open seat, St. Paul seat. James Garrett, the new appointee, will be joining the CAP board at our next board meeting, which means that today Ted Lentz will join us for his last meeting as an official CAP board member. Ted, we want to make sure you can attend the next meeting of the board, which will likely be in April or May, so that we can take the time to properly thank you for just the incredible service that you have given to the board over the years. And so get ready for that, Ted. And with that, I'll move on to attendance. Board members, after I say your name, please unmute your microphone, indicate that you're present, and then mute your microphone. Again, we will move alphabetically by last name. Kate Bean.
Present.
Alicia Belton.
Present.
Elaine Fink. Representative Freiberg.
Present.
Don Grundhauser.
Present.
Representative Hertas.
Present.
Ted Lentz.
Present.
James McLean.
Present.
Senator Nelson. Senator Pappas. Daniel Yang.
Present.
Thank you. A quorum is present. First, we'll administer the CAP board oath of office to Representative Freiberg. I will read the oath to you now, Representative. When I'm done, if you're willing, please say I do. Here we go. Okay. Do you, Representative Mike Freiberg, solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota, and to faithfully discharge your duties described in Minnesota Statutes 15B as a member of the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board to the best of your judgment and ability?
I do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Representative Freiberg, you are officially a member of the CAP board. Welcome. We are all excited to work with you. And I am excited to have my neighbor in Golden Valley now on the board as well. And if you're lucky, CAP board, maybe we'll do some type of musical number for you down the road at some point. So with that, I will now ask our architectural advisors and CAP board staff to introduce themselves briefly so that the members of the public know who supports our work and so that you can put a face to a name, Representative Freiberg. So architectural advisors and CAP board staff, please come off camera, unmute your mic, and introduce yourself to the board, and then please mute your mic again.
I guess I'll go. Michael Bjornberg. I'm the AA representative, architectural advisor to the CAP board. Thank you.
Tony Chevalier. I'm a landscape architectural advisor to the CAP board via the State Arts Board.
Paul Mandel, Executive Secretary for the CAP board.
Peter Musty, Principal Planner for the CAP board.
And I am Linda Spohr, another planner with the CAP board.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's good to see everybody again, and I'm glad that you've been able to join today. We have a full agenda, so we will dive right in. First on the list, we want to address the minutes from our last board meeting on December 16th. Those minutes were in the packet that you received 2 weeks ago. Are there any edits to the minutes of the December 16th meeting? All right, seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 16th. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the meetings from December.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second them.
Thank you. Motion seconded. We'll now do an alphabetical roll call to approve the motion to approve the minutes from the December 16th meeting.
Madam Chair, who seconded that?
Mike Freiberg.
Oh,
Thank you.
Representative Freiberg,
He hasn't been sworn in yet.
yeah,
Oh,
so I think because I would like you to, I'm looking for another second, if that's
Someone
all
who
right.
was there.
Yes.
Dan,
I'll second.
Dan Yang will second.
Thank you, Dan.
My bad.
Thank you.
Representative Freiberg, I appreciate your eagerness to get involved in your first meeting here. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. And Representative Freiberg, because you were not with us during the last meeting, you can feel free to abstain on this vote. All right, Dr. Bean.
Yes, I approve.
Lisa Belton.
Yes. Yay. Yes.
Elaine Fink. Don Grundhauser.
Yes.
Representative Hertas. Representative Hertas.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Lentz, or Representative Lentz, I just gave you a promotion or a demotion, depending on how you look at it. Ted Lentz, thank you. James McLean.
Aye.
Senator Nelson. Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Daniel Yang.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion is approved and the December 16 minutes are confirmed. With the minutes approved, we'll transition into the more substantive items on our agenda. As a preview for members, we will first hear about the 2040 comprehensive plan update since our meeting last fall. After an update from board staff and the changes, we will vote to open a public comment period on the final comprehensive plan. After the comp plan, we will transition to St. Paul City School. We'll hear updates from school leadership, and Peter Musty will walk us through the details on the variance and conditional use permit. We will then vote on the variance and conditional use permit for St. Paul City School. Following this vote, we will turn our attention to the Sears site discussion. Today's focus on the Sears site will be mostly informational. The process for the Sears site development will be a long one, and will be one that we're working on for the months to come. So that's why we'll have Paul Mandel present. Paul Mandel will present the background on the pre-application concept and next steps in this process before voting on a directive to staff to officially engage in the community on the Sears site plan. And the final item on our agenda will be to discuss and decide as a board how we will find our next CAP board appointed architectural advisor. Danita Lemon's term is up, and we as a board will need to determine how to proceed. So it is a full meeting. Let's dive right in. I'm going to turn it over to Peter Musty and Linda Spohr to update us now on the work of the comprehensive plan. So please go right ahead.
Thank you, board. Thank you, board chair, Madam Chair. Linda Spohr is going to facilitate this item for us.
today.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thank you. We are very happy to be in the final stage of the comprehensive plan development. Today marks our final interim review before the plan enters the final 90-day review period, which is required by statute. So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for your reviews and your input along the way. And a very special thank you goes out to our comprehensive plan committee. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize them. They have been working with us over the past 3 years, providing early reviews and feedback on the content. So this committee currently includes our 3 architectural advisors, Michael, Danita, and Tony, as well as board members Alicia Belton, Elaine Fink, and James McLean. And it previously also included Marianne Buck, David Lanegren, and Greg Mathis, as well as our previous architectural advisor, Brian Carlson. So a big thank you to that team for all of the work that you have put in over the years. As we begin, I just have a couple of slides to share as we just walk through the content. With your board memo, let me get to the next slide here. There we go. With your board memo, you received a link to the final drafts of the 10 principal chapters of the comprehensive plan. Each of these chapters have been previously approved by you as a planning draft. We also attached to that memo the tracked changes to the policy language of those chapters, and we included one new chapter for you to review, which is the introduction to the comprehensive plan. So what we are asking of you today is approval of the changes to the policy language and to allow the full comprehensive plan to enter this final 90-day review period. So to start out here, all of our 10 principal chapters have gone through several stages of development. So the first version of every chapter, which is over in this left-hand column here, the first version of every chapter was a collection of all of the existing policy, which included not only our previous comprehensive plan, but also city, county, and state documents. And then each chapter individually went through various planning drafts and stakeholder review. So for example, the City of St. Paul has already reviewed and commented on every chapter of the plan. We asked the Department of Administration to review certain chapters, certainly chapters 1 and 2, which cover the Capitol campus, but also chapter 7A and the Capitol Rice Development Framework, because the state owns land in the Capitol Rice District. We also reached out to surrounding neighborhood groups, to local businesses, organizations. All of the chapters have also gone through a public comment period for 30 days and have been posted on our website. Then all of the chapters came to you over these last 2 years here for the approval of what we called the planning drafts. So at the time, not all of the graphics were in there. It wasn't really graphic designed and formatted, but all of the content essentially was there. So we went through this planning draft approval phase. And then all of the chapters moved into graphic design, and that is what we have just completed. So the formatted version of every chapter is now posted on our website. You received a link to those. Our next step is now this final review and approval period. And during this period, what we will be doing is completing the graphics. Graphics now are, I would say, about 98% complete. We're very close. There are a few images to be inserted. There are a few maps that are still in development. Those will be completed during the 90 days. Words won't be changed to the chapters during this review, but those few graphics that are remaining will be updated. We will also be completing the appendices. These also nearly finished, but they will be completed before your final review and approval. And we'll also be updating the document for online accessibility and optimizing the online version as well as the print version for printing. If further comments do come in during the 90-day period, we will collect those, we'll hold those until the review period is over. We won't be resubmitting any interim versions in the 90 days. So we will hold those and then come back to you should we have any edits for final approval and release of the plan. So what we are looking at now is the 10 chapters and the introduction. As I mentioned, the graphics are about 98% complete. These chapters did have some wording changes from the approved planning drafts. to this formatted version, but really the wording changes were very minor. We did some wordsmithing, we added some captions on images, but no new topics were added, and the overall meaning of the text is consistent. So there were no really significant changes. And we did offer in the memo, if you would like to see the tracked changes of the full content of any chapter, contact me, we have that, we can give that to you. What I did send you was just the track changes of the policy language for each chapter. So these changes also were much about wordsmithing, clarifying, removing redundancies, and there were some minor new content based on stakeholder feedback. So I did send you those changes, those track changes, and you have had a chance to review those along with the 10 chapters. What you did see in chapters 3 and 7, you saw more red lines in that section, and that is where we added some policy where we did not have policy in the planning drafts of those chapters. So you have that document and have a chance to review it. So I'd like to just pause now and see if you have any questions or comments on these 10 chapters or the policy changes within them. And then we'll turn to the introduction.
Members, are there any questions? We have spent a lot of time with this plan, Ms. Forrest.
We have, so it's good that there are no more questions. And you know, in the 90 days, when we ask for your approval in a couple of minutes, remember we do still have 90 days. We really don't expect more comments because this has gone through a lot of review, but that's what the 90 days is for. It's to make sure that everything is as it should be. So let's then turn to the introduction. The introduction does not contain any policy language, so it really doesn't require the same type of approval that the other chapters do, but we do need approval of the language and how it sets up the rest of the plan. We sent you the introduction with your board memo, and we requested that if you have any changes to provide them before the board meeting so we can incorporate those changes. Of course, you can also provide comments now. We just wanted to get ahead of things if we could. So we did receive feedback within these last 2 weeks since we have sent you the introduction, and the Comprehensive Plan Committee met last week and discussed the entire introduction, and we've made updates based on theirs and others' feedback. So I will just share the document. We aren't going to walk through in great detail, but this way we will be able to just see the content together. Okay, there we go. So the introduction, it begins with statutory language. This is all very standard language about the boundary and why we're writing a comprehensive plan. And then it moves into the organization of the 2040 comprehensive plan and introduces the capital area principles. In the version you received, this was at the end based on feedback we got in these last 2 weeks. It was requested that we move this up to the front, and so that is where that is now. The bulk of the chapter is the principal influences on the plan, and the principal influences are divided into 3 main sections. We're really looking at our past, our present, and our future. The past section is called the historic evolution of the capital city. We have 5 subsections here, and we start with early history and establishment of the capital city. This section was newly drafted for the comprehensive plan, and it has been reviewed. Early on, SHPO actually reviewed the entire history section, but this opening section on the early history was also reviewed by Dr. Kate Bean and Dr. Maddie DiCarlo, who is the Assistant Director of Tribal State Relations Systems Implementation in the Governor's Office. They have worked with us over the past 2 months as we have written this section, and they are also taking the lead on writing a 2-page insert for the introduction, which covers the history in more detail. And you saw in the introduction we had a 2-page spread there that is awaiting content, so that will be coming later. But I did want to thank Dr. Bean and Dr. DiCarlo for the time you have taken to contribute to this section. Your expertise is invaluable, so thank you very much for your time on that. The second section here is Cass Gilbert's vision. This section, the main points here really talking about the siting of the Capitol building, why that site was chosen, the development of the mall and how it has taken decades to develop, and we're really still doing that work today, implementing that vision. And this section really sets up chapters 1 and 2 of the plan. The next section on the impact of urban renewal addresses the shift from public transportation to personal automobile, how I-94 came through, streets were wide and superblocks created. And this era not only changed the city fabric, but also in many cases, public trust was damaged as a result of some top-down decisions. And this era really led to the creation of the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board, which was created to regulate development near the capital, as well as moved into what we call the good neighbor policy era. And really the way that we do planning here and across the country has really changed to a more community-based format. So really these sections of the introduction are setting up chapters 3 through 7C of our plan about how we look at land use and transportation in the public realm and how we do community involvement. So the principal influences section goes on to the capital area today. We talk about what's here today, who's here today, and then moves into looking to the future for major trends, challenges, and opportunities. And from the version that you have received 10 days ago, the updates we had here based on some feedback and some talk with the Comprehensive Plan Committee, there were some updates to how we talked about climate change mitigation, and that was thank you to Tony who gave us some feedback on that, as well as adding a little bit more information about this past year and how the pandemic is changing how we're looking at the future and what maybe some of the question marks are. So how is the pandemic going to influence, for example, the evolution of urban mobility here? How does it change the need for connectedness and sense of place, especially in our public spaces? So those are some of the text updates that have been made. Finally, the introduction chapter ends with the comprehensive planning process, and this just talks about the planning tracks that we went through and really our process for creating the comprehensive plan. So now we'll pause again here for any comments or questions before we move forward with a motion on the policy changes as well as the introduction chapter and to release this for the final 90 days.
Any questions or comments?
I'd like to make a comment, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I think these pages, especially the improvements you've made, are really valuable. And sitting on the task force that looks at public engagement on the memorials and monuments, I think some of the questions that have risen from some of the early conversations about understanding the entire the history of the capital region, the history of the cities. The rest of that you've addressed, a lot of those items are now addressed. So one of my, a question, I'm officially not supposed to be on this meeting or in this board, and I don't believe I received a package. If that first 25 pages went out to others, I would really appreciate getting a copy, or at least having someone in the office send me the links and I'll download myself. But I think there's just a lot of excellent data in there that will inform the conversations. And in fact, this whole month of March is going to be a series of meetings around the Zoom meetings, mostly around the state. And I believe these same questions are going to come up. So just an aha. It's good. I'm thrilled to see it. I think the graphics have really helped a lot. I've slogged through some of that writing in the early forms, and I found it a little, anyway, good stuff. Now good stuff, I should say. So thank you.
And Mr. Lentz.
We'll absolutely get that too. Go ahead, Ms. Moore.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to just say the same thing. Yes, I will definitely forward that board memo with the information to you. Thanks.
I just wanted to also give my thanks to Dr. Bean and Dr. DiCarlo for this section. I think it's very powerful, and I'm grateful for we have spent a lot of time with this report or with this plan, but for good reason. And I think it is now in a place when we can share it with the public and get their feedback on the full package. So I just wanted to add my gratitude as well.
Madam Chair, I don't see anyone else's hands raised electronically, at least.
Okay. Well, then let's keep moving right along. Thank you so much for that detailed walkthrough, and thank you to just Linda and Peter for all you've done to get us here where we're today. The plan really reflects so many of the conversations we've had about our vision for the capital area, and it's exciting. So I'll now ask, and Representative Freiberg, you can now vote because I officially signed your certificate, so you're legit, you're ready to go. So I'll now ask for a motion to officially open a 90-day public comment period. Is there a motion?
So moved. James McLean.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion. Ted Lentz.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there any final discussion on the motion before us? Okay, seeing none, we'll now do an alphabetical roll call on the motion to officially open the 90-day public comment period on the 2040 comprehensive plan. Dr. Bean.
Aye.
Alicia Belton.
Aye.
Elaine Fink. Elaine Fink.
Aye. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Elaine. Representative Freiberg.
Aye.
Don Grundhauser.
Aye.
Representative Hertas.
Representative Hertas, aye.
Ted Lentz.
Aye.
James McLean.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Daniel Yang.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion succeeds. The CAP board staff will open the public comment period. I look forward to the input that we will receive throughout this process. It will only make our final product even more reflective of the communities in and around the capital area. So thank you for that. Everybody take a deep breath. We got it done, and now it's out there. All right. Okay, so next up on our agenda is the St. Paul City School. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Belton, you had your hand raised.
No, that was an accident. I thought there was a reaction button to say yay.
That's good too. We'll take it. All right, next up on our agenda is St. Paul City School. To walk us through the updates, introduce our presenters, and describe the variance and conditional use permit, I'll turn it back over to Peter Musty. Peter, go right ahead. Mr. Musty, you are on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will ask Dr. Cavalier and Dr. Meg Cavalier and Carl Gentoff of the school team to turn on their microphones and their video cameras, and they are going to be collaborating with the presentation today. And I'm happy to have them. Dr. Meg Cavalier is Executive Director of St. Paul City School, along with Development Team Leader Carl Gentoff of 10 Square. Both back with us today. They and their team have been busy since they were last with us in November. I will ask them to say hello.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Dr. Meg Cavalier. Happy to be with you this afternoon.
And my name is Carl Gentoft. I also appreciate your time.
Meg and Carl, as I said, represent a design and development team, but they also represent a big community of many school families that have been working together through design decisions and zoning approvals for their proposed new K-12 charter school campus at the corner of University and Marion. I'm going to start slides and we will work through information for you. So the presentation today is an update on the design of the school, an explanation of the zoning issues, and then board members will be asked to discuss and vote on two matters: a conditional use permit for the K-12 school and a design variance related to a setback regulation allowing for a small corner entry plaza, creating a place of safety right at Marion and University. And it's become necessary in the site plan to establish safety for families and kids outside the main entry. Note to the board members that the information presented today is simply a summary of the information included in your memo for this item, which is accessible to the public at the CAP board homepage. I will ask Meg and Carl to speak to key issues as we go, starting with some background of the school, about the school, and about their project. Dr. Cavalier.
Thank you. The mission statement of our school is that we will provide a nurturing community where students thrive academically and socially in a supportive, empowering environment. We challenge our students to discover their greatness by learning through experience in a small, supportive community. And on the next slide, there's a summary of our student body. As Peter shared, we're a public charter school district currently serving 520 students. We are committed to being small. Our district serves 2 sections of students per grade, and classes are capped at 25 students at the primary middle school and 20 students at the high school. You can see a breakdown of our demographics, and it's frankly challenging to share with you in just a few moments how special our community is, and that our staff are incredibly passionate in serving the whole child, including providing an excellent education, but also a well-rounded full-service community school model. And the next slide is a very brief summary of the incredible academic growth that our students make. The St. Paul City School student population is almost entirely made up of children who receive free or reduced price lunch as a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's free and reduced meal program. And when looking at the academic outcomes of these students compared to the same population of students in the traditional St. Paul Public School District, you can see that St. Paul City School students outperforming their peers in both academic achievement as well as growth. And we are just incredibly proud of them.
So the St. Paul City School project, thank you, Dr. Cavalier. The St. Paul City School project will establish a new 71,000 square foot K through 12 charter school flex community space, mid-block playground parking at the northeast corner of University of Marion, combining 3 smaller schools into 1 campus. The school shares their block with League of Minnesota Cities, which is selling the property to the school. The most recent uses before the overflow parking here shown were an auto dealership and then also residential homes along Sherburne. I will ask Dr. Cavalier and Mr. Gentoff to speak to this, but the plan for the school here is a horseshoe site plan that brings the corner plaza and a variety of active building frontages out to engage University, Marion, and Sherburne, then with the service, play, and loading and parking areas located to the inside of the block. I would ask Dr. Cavalier or Carl to speak to that section that we have there explaining the different levels of the academic this time.
So you can see the academic wing is on the west and north section, and the first floor will be our primary school, that's pre-K through grade 5. The second floor will be our middle school, and the third floor is the high school. You can then see at the corner of University and Marion is the entrance at the plaza. And then just to note that there is an additional entrance directly adjacent to that space for more of our families, which is located near where the buses and vans and where families and staff will be parking. That commons and cafeteria will also double as community space, and we've designed the building intentionally in order to provide the safe opportunity for us to lend that space to the community on the evenings and weekends and summer. Can then see the gym and assembly area, as well as a clinic, and that we have a partnership with Minnesota Community Care, who will be supporting and facilitating a clinic that will be utilized by both our students and families in the community during the day, but also open on the evening and weekend.
Carl, did you want to speak to any of this detail? Or?
Yeah, we're also adding 47 parking spaces on site, and then some hardscape play space that will be used next to the playground that will also be double for van pickup and drop off. That'll be controlled access only during the drop off and pickup periods of the day.
Thanks. All right. So the next few slides are street level illustrations that give a sense of the new experience of the building along University, Marion, and Sherburne. And then I'll again invite Dr. Cavalier, Mr. Gentoff to speak to some of the highlights. So here we are looking westward from University. To light rail would be to your left, right along here. You can see down to the corner at Marion and University. Sorry. One second. Transition to, there we go. So Dr. Cavalier, if you could speak to some of the buildings that we're seeing now along University.
Certainly. So we, similar to the last image, are looking west. So you can see there first is the clinic with a separate entrance, and then the gym, and then just kind of the corner of the cafeteria, the beginning of the common space.
The materials are really picked up in a variation of some of the same materials throughout the building, but the design team has really worked to really individuate or sort of create a smaller sense of a range of buildings as you go along the street and provide a lot of visual interest. The next perspective is looking from Marion and University. And so Dr. Cavalier, could you explain a bit about how the entry then works and preview the reason for the design variance? This is the before and the after.
Yeah, certainly. So there's dual purpose. One is, as you mentioned, Peter, just regarding the safety of our students, thinking about our little pre-K students, and frankly, is all the way up to high schoolers. That it is a busy intersection, and that's part of the draw for the location for us. But it is also a safety concern, as I'm sure you can all understand. And so what you can see is that our team has designed a plaza that really sets back that main entrance. On this corner of University and Marion. Our hope is also to energize the block and the community, and that was a part of our design as well. Both of our entrances will be secure and be staffed throughout the day. In this entrance, students would be able or directed to be able to use this entrance at the beginning and end of the day, and that's a part of our mobility plan in utilizing the Green Line. Many of our high school students currently take Metro Transit to and from school, and so that's certainly of benefit. And then, as I shared, there is the adjacent entrance directly through this entrance that would be used throughout the day.
And of course, board members, we can return to any of these images to answer questions later on during discussion. This is the third perspective, looking from Marion, so moving around the block from Marion and Sherburne, looking at the site. And again, this is where you see the one academic wing with the different schools on the different floors. So the next slide, really, the team met with CAP board staff with the regular attendance of Advisor Chevalier to work through and successfully resolve several zoning and design issues. Our zoning code, as you know, places a great focus on creating walkable and interactive street level experiences. If Advisor Chevalier is available here, I'd like him just to share a couple thoughts about collaborating with the school team.
Sure, thanks, Peter. Yeah, as Peter mentioned, we went through a pretty lengthy process reviewing the plans submitted by the team, and they were very responsive in addressing any of the concerns that we had, and we've had, I guess, weekly meetings for most of the fall of 2020, reaching into 2021. So we've really made a thorough attempt to help them provide the best product for the capital area, but also for their constituents, their students themselves. And I think that ultimately the final product is really a great asset to the community as a whole.
Thank you, Advisor Tony. And then I'll now point out the last bullet on the mobility commitments, to which Dr. Cavalier Carl will speak to. Next, the team worked collaboratively with Move Minnesota and followed guidance from Chapter 7A of the Capital Rights Development Framework on Mobility. Dr. Cavalier.
Yep. We were very happy with the interaction that we had with Move Minnesota, and we were working through some of our estimates that we had come up with given our 3 current sites. And then we were working to see what kind of goals we could establish as a team and as a community to really create less traffic and manage the demand that we'd have at the site. A couple are there's kind of like 4 buckets of mobility goals we've established. We're going to try to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles used by staff from 78 to 55% through a variety of actions we'll be taking, and I'll discuss those in a bit. We're also trying to increase bike ridership from 20 students and 3 staff to basically double it to 40 students and 6 staff through a combination of bike parking and education and a bike tuning shop station that would be at the school. We're also going to be encouraging staff and students to walk because there is a good accessibility for both public transportation and for walking. So we're hoping to be able to double our current estimates from 20 students and 5 staff to 40 students and 10 staff members, and also finally really looking at what we could do with public transportation, both with buses and light rail, to increase that from 75 students and 15 staff to 100 students and 30 staff. We have a number of commitments that that come out of these goals, and those are also kind of looking at around parking practices. We have built or are planning to build 47 dedicated parking spaces. There's about 20 parking spaces on the street, and we've worked through a shared parking agreement with the League of Minnesota Cities to get another 8 additional parking spaces during the day and be able to get up to 30 spaces for events that we would have there. Given this, with the reduction in number of cars, should more than adequately park the staff and students, and also it does exceed the minimum that we were required to build. On the active transportation and program infrastructure, we're going to have a bunch of bike parking that we're going to build, a bike repair station, and we're going to be working to try to educate and promote bike transportation to the school. We're also looking through education and incentives to try to increase public transportation as well by making it easy and educating the staff and students, but also looking for subsidies that we can pass on to staff and students that are willing to take and public transportation. Finally, there'll be a number of educational and marketing campaigns that we will be making sure that we, as new staff and students and new families come in, we will be continuing with real-time education that'll continue while we're at the site. Finally, we will be continuing to monitoring this and measuring this over time through our traffic demand management liaison. We'll be looking at surveys of students and staff and making sure that we're looking for additional opportunities as they come up.
Thank you, Carl. And Dr. Cavalier, any other comment before we move on? Just say staff.
No, sir.
Thank you. Staff just would comment that these approaches really double down on their overall choice to locate near transit, near the station. It really helps to maximize the investments in transit. And then the K-12 school here, serving St. Paul families, really supports the urban village vision of the district. I will not go through detail here, but it is summarized in the memo that the school team is on track to complete the necessary permitting steps at the city, the watershed, and at CAP board, consulting with the county on some right-of-way issues. And Dr. Cavalier, this is a bullet point of some of the interactions, bullet points of some of the outreach activities that you've conducted. which have complied with some of our requests and some that were required. I'll ask you to speak generally to some of the issues that came up that you'll continue to work through.
Certainly. So we've worked to have ongoing communication, two-way communication with the community at large. The outcome has been 2 community forums, one in December and one just last week. And in those community forums, we have provided a summary of the project, our plans and schedule moving forward. We intend to have another community forum in the spring to discuss the construction activities. We've also presented the school operations and transportation. Certainly understand the interest in the traffic around the school site, as well as more specifics around arrival had times, parking hours, and signage near the site. We've also shared the design and have had some questions actually around the landscaping. We've also both heard the concern about safety and shared our plans for safety, as well as other opportunities for community engagement, including community art, both inside and outside of the structure.
Great, thank you. And so as board members are interested in this discussion, we can certainly return to summarize more details about the outreach and the issues that emerged. So Madam Chair, unless there are board member questions or discussion on the design and process update, I can certainly turn to the zoning matters at hand. I do see one hand.
It appears as though Representative Hertaus has a question. Representative Hertaus, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate the overview and the presentation of the site plan as such. What caught my attention right away, which was somewhat mitigated by some of the explanation of shared parking spaces, but given the information and data, I guess I would have a concern on whether or not there is adequate parking. It seems as though there are barely enough spaces, even with shared parking and street parking, which you know can be a challenge in the winter time, that there's adequate parking for staff. I saw that with regard to the number of one-time single-use drivers or occupants, I think that number was reflected at 78. And I don't really have a grasp or a handle of the total number of staff that will be hired here with regard to students and student teacher ratios. We notice there's a clinic also that would probably have some staff. I guess I'm just concerned that maybe the parking issue is not adequately resolved for this site plan. I think the overall presentation and utilizing the plaza to the entryway is interesting. Get the art renderings, how people are moving about. I could foresee parents or persons trying to drop their kids off at the corner, entering the plaza rather than the intended area on the back and off of Sherburne. It appears to me that there are potentially some spaces, although it would minimize green space, would probably provide a few additional parking spaces. Perhaps even if what I'm presuming to be that oranged area that's kind of hatched looks to me like a transfer drop-off place, which would be a much safer and more secure place to let children get out of vehicles rather than on busy University or Marion Street. So I think that's a good idea, but that could possibly be changed to a one-way in terms of loading, and might even provide some additional parking spaces there as well. So I don't have readily accessible for me what our parking requirements are based on occupant load, but it would appear to me that parking is a pretty big concern, and although we are looking at policies that being proposed to encourage ridership and bicycle ridership and use of public transit. Those are goals, but they don't necessarily control the behavior of individuals, particularly like this subarctic time of year that we just went through, where riding bicycles might not be a very good option, certainly in the wintertime. So I appreciate the presentation proposing to address the inadequacies that are obvious through use of the League of Minnesota Cities and on-street parking. But is there any other area nearby where employees could park and hop on the rail to get to the final destination, like a park and ride type situation? But I think parking still needs some greater overview as to how this proposal is moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Cavalier, do you have any comment? I can also then address it from a zoning standpoint. Or Carl.
Yeah, I would just wanted to clarify that the parking and the van drop off are both kind of one way from Sherburne down south to University. So we are trying to walk kind of a fine line about making sure we're adequately parked, but we also want to make sure we can use as much of the play space and get it animated with the children for the van drop off and pick up. But if
thank you, Carl. Madam Chair.
Peter, there was a question about staff numbers, including the clinic.
Madam Chair, I can proceed.
Sure, go right ahead, Mr. Mustine.
Thank you. Yeah, I was at the outset looking at a school on this site, wondering about the ratios, whether it would meet the code. And this essentially a couple of different uses. We have an assembly space in the gym, and that would operate really in the evening and the weekends, and there's a parking requirement for that. There is also the K-12 school requirement. And given that this is in the central corridor overlay, which comes along and on top of the MX zone, it does meet the reduced requirements for parking requirements in our code. So they are within code. The shared parking agreements do help, and they help mitigate that. There is probably, if there are issues that arise, our code calls out for and supports shared parking agreements, and I think those could be expanded if there arises an issue. But they meet the requirements of our code at this point. If in terms of, I think
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Representative Hertaus, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, again, what really is the total number of staff? I mean, I heard in the presentation there'd be secured entrances. I'm presuming there would be some security. They've got clinic staff, total number of teachers and other support staff that are going to be there. It sounds like it's going to be over 100 employees for sure, of which we have 47 parking spaces on site. I noted in the presentation 20 on Sherburne. That presumes nobody else is parking there. So that brings us to 67, 8 shared spaces with League of Minnesota Cities at 75, but it still kind of appears that we're woefully short on adequate parking. So what is the number of staff total?
The projected number, thank you, ma'am. The projected number of staff, and including the projections with the clinic, is just over 100 at 104, and that's a 5-year projection.
Okay, Madam Chair. Thank you. So it looks like based on traditional modes of parking spaces ratios, we might be as much as 1/3 short, even including the shared space. Again, it doesn't take into consideration those who may utilize walking, who may live and work in close proximity or using light rail. I understand that, but I think those are kind of the buffers in terms of adequate parking, and I don't know that that we've got a plan here that can be relied upon without creating some hardships for some of the staff. But those are my comments. Having spent my life in building and development and site plans and reviews, and I, as an applicant coming forward, having to prove adequate parking, this is the first thing that caught my attention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Hertaus. Senator Pappas, I see that your hand is raised. Please go right ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Since no one's answering my questions in the chat, I raised my hand in response to what Representative Hertaus is talking about. It wasn't clear to me how many parking spots will be available on Marion. I don't believe there's any houses on Marion, but someone could clarify that for me. And also on Sherburne, probably just this side of the street, you know, the south side of the street. I assume there's houses on the north side of the street.
Dr. Cavalier, I'm not sure if you want to take that, or Mr. Musty.
On Marion, there are parking spots. There's bus loading on Marion and some along Sherburne, but that transitions to some on-street parking. There are no parking spots along University.
There are houses further north.
There are houses on Sherburne, right? And so there are houses facing the school on the north side of Sherburne.
Just a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead, Senator.
So I'm sorry, Peter, some isn't very clear to me. So there's going to be no parking because it's a bus loading zone on both Marion and Sherburne?
During the beginning of school and at the end of school, there will be bus loading.
And will that take up the entire street of Marion and the entire block of Sherburne?
Most of those spots, yes, during those transition points.
Okay, so that doesn't help address Representative Hertaus's concern.
Not in terms of supply during those times, no.
Okay. So not for staff, basically, it would be available for visitors outside of bus loading times.
That's correct, for students, yep.
Okay.
Thank you. And Senator and all, for the chat, because this is a public meeting and we want to make sure that this is accessible, for the chat, if you can save that for anything related to technical questions or regarding technology, that would be great, just to make sure that folks see what we're doing.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was just trying to avoid interrupting the meeting, but I get
no worries. Interrupt away. Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Pappas makes a good point about the parking on the busy streets where loading would be and unloading. That basically disqualifies that from staff parking in the future. I might note when we're looking at this plan that is on the screen right now, it obviously would take away from green space, but it would appear that at the northeast side of the building, adjacent to the play courts and van loading, that there would be the potentiality of maybe up to 8 additional parking spaces right there at the east side of the building there. So, I mean, there's probably some flexibility in what is being proposed and what it finally gets done, but I think parking will continue to be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Madam Chair, I can
Mr. Musty.
Yep. I'll just say that the shared parking agreements are evolving and we can certainly look at the numbers one more time as we've been doing to make sure that there's adequate parking in between those times and during loading times. There's also, as we look around, in terms of overflow, there are other opportunities and also pay lots nearby, at least in the short term, that can be utilized.
Ms. Belton, please go right ahead.
Can't hear.
Maybe you took your hand
Sorry.
down.
No, that's me. Yeah, sorry, I didn't unmute. Thank you, Madam Chair. If I understand the parking situation correctly, each staff member has a designated spot, and they'll have a spot either in the lot or in a shared parking arrangement or on the street. And then there'll be adequate space for, like, I'm looking at like the family clinic. So I'm assuming that that's got similar operating times to when school is in session. So is that covered for that kind of flex?
I would ask Dr. Cavalier to address the dedication of spaces.
Certainly. So the family clinic will operate both during the day as well as in the evening and weekend. And so certainly on the evening and weekend time, the parking would be more open. And we would also see that the utilization of the clinic would be higher during those times. As to whether or not parking spots would be designated for staff is yet to be determined in terms of our operations. Similar to other schools, there would be designated spots both for handicap as well as visitors adjacent to the nearest entrances.
Okay, thank you. I know everybody doesn't have a car, so you may not need that kind of ratio. And as long as staff knows that they have access by bus or by train, that may not be as big an issue internally. Externally, I'm thinking about like after hours too. Like I think you mentioned there were 30 additional spaces for events. So I don't know if you've got like what other kind of community events or sports events or other kinds of things. That would be my only like question about how you handle that kind of overflow. Otherwise, it makes sense.
Representative Freiberg.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I guess I'm not too concerned about the parking. I know, especially in an area like this where there's literally light rail running across the street. I think, I know this is something cities have been looking at for a long time and potentially lowering parking requirements. And to me, it seems like a reasonable amount for the area.
Yeah.
Thank you, Representative. I want to make sure that we are noting the concern here about parking. And so if we can, just direct the CAP board staff and as well as to continue to work with St. Paul City School, to determine if there's additional work that needs to be done to address this issue. I'm very conscious of time right now. We do have the Sears discussion to get through as well, but I want to make sure that is noted, and perhaps we continue to discuss this issue at an upcoming meeting as well, if that works with the board.
Madam Chair, I would just submit that they meet the requirements after a lot of work, have met requirements for the zoning that we have for MX zone, also for the central corridor overlay. They also have worked very hard to work on the mobility shift and the goals. They have also, this definitely meets, and the ratios that we require definitely meet the goals for the capital area mode shift, the overall district goals of 50% single occupancy vehicle. So if we're moving to that, this is definitely, especially with the flexibility of so much surface parking nearby that can be utilized for shared parking. I would say that staff is very comfortable that there's enough parking at this point, but we would definitely commit to work to make sure that those shared parking agreements meet, maybe and come back to some board members to answer some questions about that very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Musty. I think that if they're satisfying the requirements and we can have that additional conversation, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
They are.
Mr. Musty, do you want to move on to the next piece here?
You bet. Thank you. So So again, in the wake of the Bethesda decision in December, board members should now be fairly familiar with both the conditional use permit criteria and variance criteria. We've included it in your memo and here in case there are any questions. As stated in your memo, the K-12 school is allowed in the capital area by conditional use permit, and it is CAP board staff judgment that both that the conditional use permit criteria A and B are met for the new K-12 school in this location. And then for item C, we submit to you no conditions that are necessary to meet A or B. And Madam Chair, staff suggests, as the board has done in the past, that unless there emerges direction by the board to do otherwise, it's possible to combine the voting on the CUP and the variance into a combined resolution following the summary of the request. We provided that language in the memo and have that on a slide. And, unless there's a question, there will be a discussion period. We can move to a description of the variance proposal.
Mr. Mussey, why don't you continue to move on to the discussion of the variance proposal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a portion of the variance notice, which is a graphic developed by the site design team and explains how the building entry sets back to create a slightly elevated plaza. You can see this, the issue of safety at the corner of Marion University is really the primary reason for the design variance and allows the building to be set back further, really than the strict adherence to the rules would otherwise allow. And again, you all have these criteria and will be asked to vote on whether the proposed design meets this criteria. It is a design variance, and staff and advisors agree with the applicant that this is a good spot for the board to consider an exception in the name of the safety of children and families at the corner. Your memo summarizes against the criteria the rationale that has been provided and summarized from the team, and that staff agrees with. And I would also update, Madam Chair, that we have not received any comment from neighbors or community, nor have received any letters in regards to the variance, nor any verbal questions on phone calls regarding the variance. The notice went out roughly 45 to 50 days ago.
Thank you, Mr. Mussey. Mr. Mandel.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was going to suggest if there's no other questions that we, as Peter mentioned, we could move both the CUP and the variance being just for that, the safety element of the plaza on the corner simultaneously if the board desires.
That would certainly be my desire if that works for folks here. Is there a motion? So unless there's any additional conversation, I want to make sure that I open that up if there's additional questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I believe that makes sense to me. So I'll now ask for a motion to approve the variance and CUP for St. Paul City School. Is there a motion to grant the CUP and variance? There's specific language for the motion as noted on the screen. Senator Pappas.
I'll move the motion that the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board approve the granting of a zoning permit by the zoning administrator of the Capital Area Architectural and Planning Board to Charter School Property, Inc. Do I need to read the rest of it, or can it just be in the record?
It can be in the record, Senator. Thank you.
So I'll move the motion as it appears on the screen.
Thank you so much, Senator. Can I, is there a second?
This is Mike Freiberg. I can second it.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. The motion is seconded. Now for discussion. Is there any discussion for the motion that is before us? Okay, seeing none. We will go ahead and do alphabetical roll call on the motion to approve the CUP and variance. Dr. Bean.
Aye.
Alicia Belton.
Aye.
Elaine Fink.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg.
Aye.
Don Grundhauser.
Aye.
Representative Hertas. Representative Hertas.
Hertas, aye.
Ted Lentz.
Aye.
James McLean.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Daniel Yang.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion succeeds and the zoning administrator is authorized to grant a zoning permit that includes a conditional use permit and variance. Thank you, members. Next on the agenda is the Sears site discussion. As I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, today's discussion will be mostly informational. The development process for the Sears site involves the CAAPB board, the city of St. Paul, private developers, and the community that lives in the neighborhood. In a moment, I will ask our Executive Secretary, Paul Mendel, to walk us through the process that we have in front of us. But I first want to say that we have an opportunity as a board to make sure that we use this process to meaningfully engage with the communities and people that live around the Sears site. And I expect that we will do so in a proactive and impactful way. The values that we are incorporating into our comprehensive plan are the same ones that we should be centering in this process. Accessibility, people-oriented design, and public engagement are a few of them, and there, of course, are many more. As we think about how to plan for a space that will foster community, healthy living, and equity for those living in the area, I encourage this board to seek out input from people who we may not traditionally have heard from in the development planning. We need to ensure that we are not pushing people out, but we are welcoming them in. It is critical that we engage in an ongoing way with all of the stakeholders in this process, and I'm excited that today marks the beginning of this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul Mendel to present on the development process. Mr. Mendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As for some of you, this is you've heard about this for the past year and been waiting. When I first came to the board in 1987, then Lieutenant Governor Marlene Johnson was actually taking a plane trip to Ohio to the Sears headquarters to speak to them about their future plans. In 2013, the CAAPB board reviewed back then, and Paul Dorbriel was with us then for Sears, some concept plans. Last year, exactly 1 year to the date, we were meeting with the city and the Sears folks, and now we are back with an actual plan that is the beginning, just the beginning of a long process that you'll probably be hearing about and looking at and reviewing for possibly several years to come. With that, I'll turn it over to Peter Musty, who's and we did already present this to the mayor and two council members in advance of this meeting, and the material that you have will be posted on our website at 3 p.m. today. So with that, Peter.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Madam Chair. And happy to have presenters and resources today. An interdisciplinary group, including Luis Pereira. I'd ask them to turn their video cameras on before we go to some slides and images. Luis Pereira, Director of Planning for the St. Paul Department of Planning and Development, and then representatives of Sears site ownership and the design team, including Seritage Growth Properties and site designers S9, both based in New York City, and then site designers and engineers Kimley Horn, working from here in the Twin Cities. I'll ask those representatives to come online and say hello.
Good afternoon. I'm Will Matzik with Kimley Horn. Excited to begin this exciting process with the board and stakeholders. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
And Paul, and then Louis.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Dorelli. I'm representing Seritage Growth Properties. Have been involved in the asset for some number of years, back as a consultant to Sears before Seritage bought the property. So we're very excited to be formally kicking off the planning process today. And thank you for your engagement with us today.
Thank you.
Is Luis Pereira with us?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Luis Pereira, Planning and Economic Development at the City of St. Paul, Planning Director. I'm excited to be participating today along with my team, as well as other city departments. I coordinate closely with Peter in ensuring that we have input from our various departments, and so excited to see this move forward and help him answer some questions if you've got them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I'll be collaborating with the development team and bringing the board information today, and all of us are, of course, are able to answer questions from board members. I'd like to remind board members and the public that information is summarized in the board memo that the board member has received. That will be published at 3 p.m. today after the meeting on the CAP board homepage. Today, we did have the meeting with the mayor, but I'm going to share slides and move through the information. So basically, the presentation looks at the vision through a few lenses. We will spend some time looking ahead at the vision, some time looking back to put the idea and the planning in context, and then spend some time looking at the community review process in front of us this year and get board advice on that. The board will be asked to launch the community review process today. This is for some of you not familiar exactly with the details of the site. It's around 20 acres. This shows some key landmarks. This is from your memo, and you will see Western Park here, Western Sculpture Park here, Capitol Ridge Office Building with the Best Western Hotel, State Transportation Building. Rice Street is the eastern border. Marion is the western border, and it runs down to the interstate. Today, this meeting marks the very first release of long-range images from the site owner about the basic concept to implement a large portion of the urban village vision for the district. The owner does this by breaking up the larger Sears block into smaller blocks, restoring old city street connections and introducing a couple new streets, and establishing a central community green. And I'll relate that in staff initial measuring of the concept against the community planning reveals really that the site ownership has been listening to community planning for some time, and they intend to implement several core aspects of the community planning. Today, we will look at the pre-development process that includes concept approval, environmental review, and final approvals of the master plan here at the CAP board in the city. Then that gives way to the development process. We'll really turn to site ownership, and the project leads to speak to that very soon. A word on the zoning and look at the site. Today, the site, similar to the school we just considered to the north, falls within the CAP board's MX zoning district. It sets in place a 4 to 6 story height limit and development regulations for individual parcels. Also, like the new school, the site is within the CAP board's central corridor overlay and further relaxes parking standards and encourages transit-oriented development and walkability within walking distance of the Capitol Rice Station. And then you'll see the initial proposed plan here of a small block pattern. Although it may change through the community review process ahead, it proposes to respect the height limits and regulations of the MX zoning, creating blocks more similar to what is around the site now, and also what was in place before 1963 when the Sears site was established. So to say, really, we are at a stage here where, as Paul mentioned, there has been a lot of planning. In fact, it's been ratified into comprehensive planning for the capital area and the Rice, which really pulled in the Rice Station area planning. And I will show you quickly how they're really building on that planning and plan to implement. And it's clear that the ownership team really wants to comply with the board policy in the stationary planning. So here in your memo summarized really how it supports the past plans. It introduces a community green. It introduces a street and block pattern that we have called for in our comp plan. It maintains the height limits that our zoning establishes. It also has potential, with details to review, to support Rice Street vitality and reintroducing further vitality in a complementary way along Rice Street, and then reconnects neighborhoods, the potential to really reconnect neighborhoods in the Western Sculpture Park through Rice Street to the Capitol campus, through to Rice Street, Capitol campus in downtown. And here you see actually how the premise of the plan, this is in 1940s versus over on the right, is today. It really does is reestablish a small block pattern that was in place before this year's site. And these are just some of the connections that used to be in place that we then are able to now see restored in the new plan. And again, I would come back to this to answer questions about where some of these features have come from, but I'm going to move forward and talk through really the pre-development process ahead. Again, we are at the very beginning, and this board will be launching a community review process that's ahead in the coming months, and it's a 4-step pre-development process. Today we're here. We are about to engage, with your advice, a public engagement process that would be part of a concept approval by the CAP board. That would then lead to an environmental review process that triggers for any larger development like this. And then finally back to both a final approval here at CAP board that would go right along in parallel with a city approval at the council level of a new plat. So with that, I'm going to really turn to the ownership team and describe more about the background of the design and speak to the eventual development process and phasing of a mix of uses.
Sure. Thank you, Peter. This is Paul Dorelli. On behalf of Seritage, we do thank you again for the time today, and are very pleased with the collaboration we have had over the years with CAP's board staff as well as city staff. And I think what we're presenting here in a aspirational vision for the site in our mind is consistent with what we see as the framework set out by the CAP board for a more dense, vertical, urban style village, light on the surface parking, taking more advantage of the opportunity to create something that feels walkable and urban and takes advantage of the proximity both to the Capitol and to the transit. We have laid out in this plan, and it's obviously kind of a double-edged sword. You want to show a vision, but also know that we're not fully baked in terms of the concept, because we know we do have an extensive community engagement process to go through, and we expect that we will push and pull through that process. But we thought it was important to show some render imagery to show that the preliminary design work that sets out the building framework on that grid, which we do think is really important to reestablishing the fabric of the community. This is what it would look like as we extrude those buildings up. We may push and pull pieces, but really the intent is to maintain that urban feel. It's a little difficult to see in the imagery, but you see it better on the master plan. There is a large central green that we see as an important component, both as an amenity to the uses within the project, which includes residential, office, hospitality, and retail, an amenity both to those users as well as to the surrounding neighborhoods. And we know that was an important part of the CAP staff's vision, as well as they were doing their planning. So we do thank staff for working with us and guiding us along to this vision. We know we're starting a long process, and we look forward to the engagement and to responding to the comments that we do hear through that process. I think we're certainly at a point in time where a year ago we were just about ready to file this plan. We had kind of our final sit down with staff at CAP and the city, and then 2 weeks later woke up to everything going on lockdown. So we paused for a year, and we're back now to restart this in earnest. And I think that, we understand that as we are now public with this reveal of the plan, it will certainly help us go to market and shake out, where the demand lies for the different components. Just as an example, we had two very interested hotel groups, prior to the pandemic. We'll see where the current hospitality demand lies in light of, the hotel industry taking it fairly tough through this cycle, but we expect it will be back, but it may not be in a position where that ends up in a phase one. Housing obviously remains robust, office demand to be seen, but I think now that we are in a position where we can publicly, talk about the project with some graphics, it will be very helpful in us starting to shake out where the demand lies, and that will lead to kind of really shaping what a phase one may look like. So as we start this process of working together through the conceptual master plan, we hope as we're partway through that process, we'll be able to further define what that phase one may look like so that we can bring that forward and kind of in parallel towards the later part of the overall master plan process, hopefully bring a phase one together so that we can more specifically focus on those particular buildings and aspects. But that will take some additional market reconnaissance to bring forward. But we do appreciate everybody's time and support so far on the project, and look forward to continuing to bring this project forward, which is certainly an important one for the company.
And thank you, Paul. And Madam Chair, I'm prepared to speak to a set of desired activities that would involve the community and other agencies directly in reviews of the vision. We very much didn't want to design a process until we spoke and engaged with communities. We have appointments with district councils that we are seeking. We have Capitol River Council scheduled, and we are really hoping that the staff and the development team will have a chance to meet with folks and design a process that directly engages on several levels community members' concerns and allows them to provide genuine input and authentic process.
Mr. Musty, did you want to speak to that more, or should we move on and see if there are questions from board members?
I think if there are questions about the larger vision at this point, I am certainly able to either one, Madam Chair.
So I appreciate, as we are starting the beginning of this conversation, and walking through the path forward. Clearly, as was mentioned, things have changed a bit in the last year, and so that will certainly impact the site. But I'd like to just open it up to the board and to just think about the values and considerations that are on your mind as you think about the work that we have ahead of us, and just as it's powerful to see this image in front of us for what many of us have seen, as the Sears building and quite a bit of open parking space for a long time to be able to see this image in front of us. But what are some of those values and considerations members are thinking about or want us to center as we have this discussion? And I would just open it up for folks to go ahead and raise their hand and chime in here. Ted Lentz, go ahead.
Thank you. I have to share the comment that I think it is exciting to see what could possibly be happening on the Sears site. And I was really thrilled initially, and still am, to see the site plan, which shows a clear intention to reopen, I believe it's Fuller Street, straight through the site, which will connect that part of the city straight into the space between the state office building and right on to the mall area, which is terrific. What I was hoping to see was a little clearer, and I'm not sure it's possible, but south of that, the next major cross street is Ravoux, and it would be good in my thinking to think in terms of linking. One of the drawings showed arrows connecting straight through Ravoux onto the state, the mall area, the state campus, and then that mid-block horizontal line just due south of your the proposed park, connecting straight through. And I mention that because when there are events at the state capitol, and for me, one of the very exciting ones was the dedication of the Laos Special Forces Monument. People parked in that lot and walked over, and I was delighted to see that connection and that way to use accessible streets, because one of the issues that had arisen many times in talking about the restoration of the Minnesota State Capitol was how we could create linkages to the rest of the city of St. Paul. And also the Capitol, part of the conversation about the Capitol was with the improvements that would certainly increase the number of visitors, COVID pandemics notwithstanding, that has begun to happen. And I think there's a lot of us that keep looking at the Capitol Mall area as being really one of the potentially strong amenities in the city of, and I think the opportunity for the Sears site to, if keeping that in mind, to realize that they're in a position not unlike, creating an urban, a type of urban center that, just as in New York, the Upper West Side, south end of Central Park, is considered a terrific amenity to be able to easily walk from the residential into into that public space that we have. We have that. Speaking about the connection of Ravoux through, I would hope that, and I'm not certain how, with the Department of Transportation building, they have their triangular lot down there, which is what people on weekends walk straight through. So I'm just tossing out ideas that, for me, that's the drawing is shown is very preliminary, and it's clearly, but it just excited me to think of expanding the links to the Capitol and to the mall area as well. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. That is exciting to think about the flow of traffic and just flow of people, and especially now, to be very candid, as we are in a moment where there's not a lot of life around this building due to the pandemic. Mr. Hertas, or Representative Hertas, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would echo the same comments that Mr. Lentz has just said. I share the excitement for the concept plan of how this area can be utilized. I also am aware that at least a large percentage of legislators who have housing accommodations in St. Paul might look to this site as a potential alternative to housing accommodations with regard to the legislature. And that in mind, the connectivity between the facilities and maybe one of the buildings or whatever via a skyway or a tunnel or something of that nature would certainly aid in the ability to simply walk to the Capitol in the wintertime when we meet without having to even do the outside elements. So that connectivity, certainly the street alignment, as Mr. Lentz had pointed out, and the activities associated with the Capitol all lend itself well, but good job on this concept plan. And Madam Chair, with the Zoom link, could you clarify, or Mr. Matzik and Mr. Diorelli, I wasn't able to catch who you represent or what your organizations are.
Sure. This is Paul Dorelli. My company's National Development Advisors. I represent Seritage as the development manager on this project. I had first started working on the site through my National Development Advisors entity on Sears' behalf about 7 or 8 years ago. And then when Sears sold the property out to the then new publicly formed company, Seritage Growth Properties, when they went public on the New York Stock Exchange, then bought this asset, I was asked to come in as an employee. So I spent 5 years on the management team overseeing development across the portfolio for Seritage. I then left the company in June and reestablished my previous consultancy, and I still handle this project for them on a contract basis, as well as a couple other projects. So I have direct development management oversight of the asset and report up to the executive team at Seritage.
Thank you, Mr. Dorelli. That's helpful. And Mr. Matzik, what's your role?
Yes, I'm with Kimley Horn and Associates, and we're a national planning and engineering consulting firm located here in St. Paul, and we'll be working closely with Paul Dorelli and the Seritage team on the pre-development stages here of the project, as well as the development on the project and community engagement and design. So.
Well, good job. It looks like an exciting project. I wish it could happen sooner than 2030, but anyway, this is the first step.
I would associate myself with those remarks, Representative Hurtas. Thank you. Any additional comments or things folks want to share here as we are embarking in this process or continuing this process? Well, go ahead, Mr. McLean.
Hey, thanks. I just had and I actually have a ton of questions. I think it's exciting and glad to see the renderings, but understand it's still very early stages. But I'm curious if you have, if there's anything you can share in terms of the types of housing you at least potentially envision. Would it be apartment? Would it be condo? Would it be a mix? And is there would it be all market rate, or do you think there's any ability to include affordable housing? Is one question. And the second, and I also have another question, and again, probably too early to say much about this, but I was curious about any types of public art. And it may actually be more of a question for staff. I'm curious about whether what role the CAP board has in public art for a project like this, or actually even for the last one we saw. I know there was discussion of potentially public art down the road. I'm just curious if the CAP board has any, beyond approval of like site plans, is there anything related to public art that the CAP board plays a role in, or is that more directly than just kind of facilitating conversations and community input? Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. McLean. Mr. Musty.
Yes, I would love to answer that. I first probably should turn to Paul Dorelli and Mr. Matzek about the housing mix, and sure, as that gets planned. And then I would be very happy to answer a question about public art, community art.
Sure. Thank you. Good question. We certainly have understood in our conversations, both with the city and CAP staff, that a mix of housing is certainly desirable. So we will be looking towards mixed income opportunities across the site. We're early, in any of those conversations as to what that mix looks like. Same with for sale versus rental. Typically, given that Seritage is a publicly traded REIT and income from rental operations for those type of REIT structures is preferable to income from the sale of property. It would more likely lean towards a rental property than a for sale component. Not to say that it couldn't include a for sale component, but as we get further into the process, we'll certainly be getting deeper into what that mix of income looks like. But we want it to provide diverse housing opportunities. Current scope of potential units in the potential 600 to 800 unit range throughout the project as we currently have it planned. Again, that can push and pull as maybe the office components go up and residential goes down, but we're looking at a fair amount of housing. And so we think we do have opportunities to provide a diverse offering there. And Pete, as to the public art, I'll let you weigh in, and just know from an ownership standpoint, we're open to considering those opportunities within the project to provide some public art as well.
The comment I would have is that this represents some new private development. It also represents an extension of St. Paul back over the site. There'll be public rights of way, a new community space, and that's part of what the questions that we definitely would like to reach out to the community and involve them with that discussion. And it's a chance to show on page 4 of the memo that will be published on the site here some of the issues that have been identified in just quick analysis of our comp plan. Reveal a lot of issues that really need discussion, and housing is one. But community art and how the community expresses itself. We have a lot of great history at the campus, but also in the capital area, right around the campus. And how is that expressed in this new part, the restored part of St. Paul? Is a big opportunity, and one we would want to start talking to community members about right away.
Thank you, Mr. Musty. Members, I am cognizant of time here. We've got about 14 minutes left. So if there's just any additional things that you'd like to share, this certainly will not be the last time that we have this conversation, but just wanted to open it up for folks. I would just add here that I would, Mr. McLean, your comments about the need for affordable housing in this development plan is something that I certainly, believe is important here to the discussion. We are in a time, certainly with the COVID-19 pandemic, that has exacerbated the need for affordable and accessible housing for folks. But just generally in this area, know that there is certainly a need. So I am encouraged, Mr. Dorelli, by your comments about having mixed income opportunities and diversified housing. That is a need, and as we've also experienced with Highway 94 going through the Rondo community, displacement of folks is something that I think folks are very sensitive to in this particular area and community. And I don't know, Mr. Pierre, if you have any things that you'd like to add there, just from the City of St. Paul perspective.
Chair and board members, thank you. Yes, absolutely. That's very important for the city. We obviously are very interested in ensuring that this site, this project, fits within the broader neighborhood environment. It's sort of at a crossroads between 3 different neighborhoods and including downtown and the Capitol complex. Definitely want to ensure that an equitable development lens is utilized here as part of the process. So appreciate your comment there.
Thank you. Any additional comments from members? We certainly will have more time to dig in here, but. Okay, well, let's move right along. So, the official next step here will be to develop and implement a set of community and stakeholder engagement activities. And I know that as we are in this process, it's an awesome opportunity to also hear from our task force on engagement as well, who will, I think, provide us with recommendations as to how to also move forward here. So I'll ask for a motion to direct staff to begin to develop these plans, and after the motion is seconded, we'll have time for any additional discussion to the motion, but know that this is an ongoing conversation. So Is there a motion to officially begin the Sears site redevelopment work by authorizing the CAP board staff to begin public conversation? Specific language, if you can pop that back up on the screen, I'd appreciate it. It's Peter.
No.
Thank you. Specific language is on the screen. So can I get a motion?
I so move. Ted Lenz.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
I second. Belton.
Thank you, Ms. Belton. Now for discussion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll now do alphabetical roll call on directing staff to begin community and stakeholder engagement. Dr. Bean.
Aye.
Alicia Belton.
Aye.
Elaine Fink.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg.
Aye.
Don Grundhauser.
Aye.
Representative Hertas.
Hertas, aye.
Mr. Lentz.
Aye.
James McLean.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Daniel Yang.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The motion succeeds and the Sears site redevelopment process has officially begun. I'm really excited about the work ahead of us on this project, and we will certainly return to it in future meetings. Thank you so much, Mr. Dorelli and Mr. Rennet, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
The last item on our agenda is a brief discussion and decision about how, as a board, we will move to appoint our next architectural advisor. As a reminder, there are 3 architectural advisors to the CAP board. Of the 3, only 1 is appointed by the CAP board itself. Right now, Danita Lemon is serving in that role. Her term has expired, and Danita has done a tremendous job at serving as an advisor, and I'm so grateful for the time and input that she has shared with the board. We have 2 options on next steps. The first would be to decide as a board to reappoint Danita in her role as an advisor. The second would be to open up the search for an advisor and ask for applications from qualified members of the public. We would, of course, welcome Danita to reapply via that process, but it would also allow for other interested parties to apply. So just wanted to open it up and see if there are preferences from the board on these options. Senator Pappas.
I would recommend that we keep Danita. I think that it takes a while for people to build up expertise in working with the CAP board, and we should take advantage of the expertise. I can't recall how long her term is. Is it 2 years or 4 years? 4 years. But if she's willing to continue with us, I think we should stay with her.
That's fine with me. Okay. Any other discussion? Mr. Lentz.
Mr. Lentz. Just, is it appropriate to ask staff for input on that? Have they made an internal recommendation about keeping Danita? I really don't, I apologize, I do not know her work well, but I agree with Senator Pappas that it takes a while to get your bearings here. And so I don't have any objection to retaining her. I was just curious to know if there were any concerns. Paul, any thoughts?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Riddle.
Danita has served 1 term. Our board advisors are limited to 2 terms and they go off. She is a CAP board appointment as opposed to an AIA or state arts board. So this is up to the CAP board completely. And I see Mr. McLean has a hand raised too.
Mr. McLean, go right ahead.
Thanks. Paul answered the question I had. How are the others appointed? And my other question was just going to be, when was the last time we open it up, but it sounds like Ms. Lemon has just done one term, and I tend to agree that if she's willing to serve another one, it would be great. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Ms. Fink.
Yeah, I have served with her now on a committee or two, and she really has terrific input, I think, on the committees aside from being helpful on the board itself. So I would say if she's willing to put in another 4 years with us, I would go for that.
Wonderful. Senator Pappas, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, I was just wondering if we could hear from her.
Ms. Lemon, I believe, is on the call.
Yes.
Ms. Lemon, would you like to chime in here as we are talking about you, which is a little strange while you're sitting here?
Anita, can you turn your camera on too?
Yep, it should be on. Are you seeing me?
Yes, we will, and it looks like we are going to.
Sorry, it's a little dark. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, CAP Board. Yes, it has been a privilege and honor to serve on the board. It's always interesting and enriching to be part of this group. So I am honored to continue if that is the choice of the board.
Well, I certainly think, Ms. Lemon, if you are willing to continue to serve, we would appreciate having you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mendel, is there anything else that we need to do here for the process itself?
You could put off the nomination. You could actually put off the appointment for one more meeting, or you could make the appointment. She serves until replaced. So, but the board does need to, if you want to re-up her, it's simply a simple motion, or however whatever your pleasure is.
Well, Senator Pappas, I would actually invite you to make that motion if you're willing to do so. Oh, Senator, you're on mute.
I'm happy to make the motion, although I didn't know if Elaine Fink wanted to make it since she has her hand raised.
Oh.
Oh,
No.
it's a mistake.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
I would move that the CAP board agree to continue with our architectural advisor of Danita Lemon.
Is there a second?
I would second it.
Thank you, Ms. Fink.
Madam Chair, can we just take a, without a roll call? I don't know, on something like this.
I was going to go through the roll call, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Okay, excellent. So the motion before us is to reappoint Ms. Danita Lemon for a 4-year term to continue to be our architectural advisor in the CAP board. So with that, Dr. Bean.
Aye.
Ms. Belton.
Aye.
Ms. Fink.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg.
Aye.
Mr. Grundhauser.
Yes.
Representative Hertas.
Hertas, aye.
Mr. Lentz.
Aye.
Mr. McLean.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Mr. Yang.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you, Ms. Lemon. You will continue in your service to us. We really appreciate it. Okay. Yes, thank you. With that decision made, we have now covered everything on today's agenda. Thank you all for your time and attention. And I wanted to end on one final note here, is to thank Lisa Oakes for her work on the board. For those who don't know, Lisa has worked with the board since 2017, providing a crucial administrative support, and has an adorable friend with her here as well. Lisa, thank you so much for working so hard to ensure that we do our work well, that we're accessible to the public and prepared for important conversations that we have on this board. I speak for the whole board in saying that we so appreciate your service and your work with us. And we wish you the very best moving forward. Just again, thank you so much. And Ted, we will make sure that you will receive a calendar invite to our next meeting. We'll have confetti, just wanted to say thank you. Mr. Mendel, please go right ahead here as we're wrapping up.
Yes, Madam Chair, and board members. Your executive committee, which is Alicia Belton and Elaine Fink, will be starting to proceed with the, I've been talking with MMB, and my position will be posted during March and April. As the executive committee, and speaking with the Lieutenant Governor as chair, we have discussed bringing Ann Buck back since she was in on the interviews for both my predecessor, Nancy Stark, and myself, whereas Elaine and Alicia would be new to this. So the three of them will be working with Minnesota Management and Budget HR folks. We'll be posting the position by mid-March. Then MMB does the shortlisting, and your executive committee will be conducting the interviews and then making a recommendation to the board, which will hopefully be able to meet either the last week of May or the first week of June, so that whoever you select will be able to give notice to their previous location and make plans to come as I retire on June 30th. So look forward to a board meeting either end of May or beginning of June. We will have our comprehensive plan complete, and we will be selecting my executive secretary replacement. So thank you, Madam Chair.
How's that feel, Paul, to say that out loud? You okay?
A little too final.
So that is our timeline. Senator Pappas, I see that your hand is raised.
Just one short comment. So I didn't realize that Paul was retiring, Paul. And if I am appointed to continue on the CAP board that's still pending, his replacement will then be the fourth secretary that I've worked with. Because I started before Nancy with, I think it was Gary.
Gary Greffenberg, yes.
Yeah, Gary Greffenberg, right.
Wow. Well, that is Senator Pappas. Thank you for sharing that with us, because you certainly understand what has happened with the CAP board over the years. So I appreciate that. So thank you again, Lisa. We appreciate you. Just yay! I wish we had the ability to emote more for you, but thank you so much for your service. With that, I think we're in a place where we will wrap up the meeting. So take care, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy. And with that, and please go outside and enjoy this amazing false spring that we will have before our inevitable next snowfall. But please enjoy it. Stay healthy and safe. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.